American Electric Power is, as the chairman said, among the country's largest utilities, and it's a joy for me to be here. Our SWEPCO, Southwestern Electric Power Company, operates here in the state of Arkansas, as I know you know. We're the lowest cost producer of electricity in this state and proud of that, at least of the regulated utilities. I'm not sure about all the municipals and co-ops. The chairman has asked us to address some issues inside of the sustainable energy work that you're doing here in Arkansas, and has put in front of us a handful of questions, and I'll try to address those questions and share with you the way that we see them. The first one is kind of interesting, and it's very detailed in the sense that it involves our friends in Washington. As you know, there are 534 members of Congress. The state of Minnesota is one senator short still. I think they'll get that figured out one of these days. But at any rate, the question is, Congress and the new administration are undertaking the stimulus package, and how does that affect the utility business, and how does that impact the Sustainable Energy Resource Plan? And really, they're doing that in three different ways. The first, and I think maybe the most important, is that they have built in energy efficiency as one of the things they'd like to see all of us work on, and of course we're all working on that, both here locally as well as on a national level. Energy efficiency is considered by all to be the most cost-effective way for the United States to lower its carbon footprint, to address the issue of ever-rising cost of energy for all of us, for the electric cycle as well as natural gas and oil and all of the other undertakings. For us, however, we think it's important in energy efficiency, which comes to you and me in our place of business in our homes, as weatherization, as additional window replacements, as all of the kinds of things that will make the envelope within which you and I live or work more energy efficient itself. I worry a great deal about how those funds will flow through the process, and from us, I think the better way to do that would be to give the money to the Arkansas Public Service Commission. They in turn could allocate it out to the utilities to make sure that the money's spent. Some time ago in a past administration, these same kinds of programs came out, and millions of dollars were spread across the country, and unfortunately, very few houses went through an energy enhancement undertaking, and the money's gone. And that's just one of those things that I think it would be much better if the government, particularly at the Public Service Commission, would be deeply involved in those endeavors. The second, and I think very important part of that, you heard what the chairman had to say about American Electric Power and the size of our generation footprint. Much of it's coal. The 38,000 megawatts, about 66% of it is coal-based. And one of the things that technology will bring not only to our country, but I think to the world, is the carbon capture and storage development, which is well underway. We're working on an assignment in West Virginia at one of our larger power plants. Actually, this September we'll begin capturing the carbon and storing it in underground reservoirs there on our site. We think it's important to do those kinds of things, and because that's a new technology that's just being brought forward, we think it's important that the stimulus package and money allocated to the Department of Energy be put to use on behalf of the environment and all of our customers throughout the country. I don't want to sound like a local preacher, but I really do believe that carbon capture and storage technology will be available by the mid-decade, deployable between 2015 and 2020. And this is essential technology for the world because China is growing to 70% coal-based. India is growing to 65% coal-based. Russia has two exportable products, oil and natural gas. They will use their indigenous coal to continue to provide the electricity for their countries to grow. And that's true in South America, it's true in Indonesia. And with the global warming challenge that we all face, carbon capture and storage is essential because coal will be burned all over the world. Coal will continue to be burned in this country, and it can be burned more cleanly. Years and years ago, there was an argument to be made that we couldn't capture the sulfur, we couldn't capture the nitrogen oxides. That's all come to pass. Cost effectively, environmentally responsible, and actually technology working better than almost anyone forecasted that it would. And I think those are very important ways for us to put that money to work because, again, but for that, carbon capture and storage technology is a technological add to an existing power plant that you and I would pay for as electric customers throughout the country. Another very important part of the stimulus package, as well as the activities going on, most importantly in the House, to a lesser degree in the Senate, are a renewable energy standard to say to all of us in Arkansas and every of the 50 states that we need to have a certain amount of our generation fleet provided by renewable sources. The most important renewable sources in the country are wind and sun. The technology is just developing. It's very costly by way of comparison to almost any other form of power. And many states, like Arkansas, aren't blessed with that much wind or sun, so that you could provide about 20% or 25% of your energy from renewables by 2025. But we are blessed in certain parts of this country with a tremendous amount of sun. Think of the southwest desert areas of the country. Think of Florida and some other states that are blessed with sun frequently. And we are deeply blessed with a wind column that really runs from the Dakotas all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. But unless you and I all want to move to the Dakotas, we're going to have to develop a transmission grid to bring that renewable energy to the marketplace. And I think part of what they're working on there, funding some of the technology to do that. The chairman mentioned that American Electric Power is the largest purveyor of electric transmission in the United States. We are that, and proudly so. We think that a development of a high-voltage electric transmission grid, not unlike what Dwight Eisenhower did when he came back from the war to build the interstate highway system, will give this country a technological advantage that will serve us well for decades. We've asked Susan Eisenhower, President Eisenhower's granddaughter, to help tell that story around the country. And I think one of the most unique storylines that she shares with audiences like this is when Governor Clinton of New York, not of Arkansas, decades ago funded the Erie Canal. He had no idea that it would lead New York to being the financial capital of the world for decades, but it did. And when President Eisenhower came home from the war and wanted to build out the interstate highway system for military purposes, he had no idea it would make California the 8th largest economy in the world, but it did. Of course, California's run into a bump or two, but that'll work itself out as we go. The point I'm trying to draw is that an interstate high-voltage electric transmission grid will allow us to rationalize not only bringing renewables to the markets where they aren't available, so that Arkansas and other states can satisfy this federal standard, but it will also allow us to, instead of building 7 power plants if needed, you could build 4 or 5 because you could move the power back and forth on the grid. So we think that the stimulus money, if well spent and well monitored, Lord knows when the government starts giving out trillions of dollars, there'll be a lot of folks there with a bad idea, not a good idea. And if we can work that through the state commissions and other venues to make sure that it gets invested in job programs and things that will benefit you and I, because you and I know that someday that tax bill will come due, then it's probably a great plan, and I hope that it goes through, and I hope that's exactly how it works. The second question that was posed to us is on the sustainable energy resources base. What are we doing at American Electric Power throughout our service territory to bring that to the fore? We are proponents of what we call Grid Smart. Grid Smart is an undertaking to make sure that the power production that we do at the generation plants are as energy efficient as they can be. It's raising the intellect of our existing transmission system. Most of you don't spend as much time on electricity as I do, at least I hope. But at any rate, as you know, electricity moves at the speed of light, and it moves in the path of least resistance. Unfortunately, that's why every now and again lightning will hit home or do whatever those things do. However, we can now, with technology advancing and cabling and metallurgy advancing, we can control the flow of electricity over that transmission grid. Much, much lower line loss along the grid. A typical 100-mile journey on the transmission grid today, if you put 100 kilowatts on the grid at point A, you'll deliver about 93 or 95 kilowatts at point B. The most recent 765 transmission grid that we built from Virginia to West Virginia, a 100-mile journey, you put 100 kilowatts on in West Virginia, you deliver 99.3 kilowatts into the state of Virginia. The efficiency rates are so much different. New metallurgy, composite technology, not all aluminum, not all copper. It really can be done. So that make the plants more efficient on Grid Smart, make the transmission more on Grid Smart, and then equally important, and maybe most important, is how we interface with you. Today, you have a meter at your house. We send you electricity. 30 days after you've used it, we read your meter. 10 days after that, we send you a bill. 1 day after that, you pay. I hope. But more importantly, it's a unique relationship that needs to change and in fact can change. And when we interface with the customers, the technology that we're working on with IBM and General Electric throughout our service territories are to bring that meter inside your house. So you can see at a single point or multiple points inside your house how much energy you're using and how much it's costing right now. It costs much more to run your dishwasher this time of the day than it does at night. However, I know in my household, if we're running the dishwasher at night, I'm the one getting up to do it. And I just soon sleep through the night, as my wife would like to do. So the technology that we'll be able to give you inside your house is to pre-program all of your equipment. It'll come on at price points, not necessarily hour points. So if you want to wash your dishes at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, it will come on at that price. If you don't want your air conditioner to run at 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour, that will turn off automatically. You will pre-program the way you use energy. You'll know what your monthly bill is before we send it to you. In fact, what I'd love to do is instead of sending you a bill, I'd rather just have a buzzer go off or a bell go off in your piece of meter inside your house. It'll tell you that you owe so much money. You will electronically transfer that money to us. You'll save time, energy, and effort, as will we. So when we think of that, we think that's an appropriate way to do it. We're doing that now in Texas, as are other utilities. I'm sure David will share with you what they're doing in the greater Houston area. We're beginning to do it in Indiana, and we're doing some of it back in Ohio. And, of course, we have ideas that we continue to talk to the Arkansas Commission about. It's an interesting undertaking, and it calls for some different regulatory treatments. A classic rate relationship and regulatory relationship that we have with you is that we spend money to build things. We go to the commission and say, we've built these things, we need to adjust the amount of revenue that we recover from our customers, and we go through a long and arduous hearing, and everyone's voice is heard, and that's exactly as the process ought to be. And then the commission decides either to approve a rate increase or not approve a rate increase. We change our billing determinants to you. We send you a bill, and your cost of electricity changes over time. All of that's important. But for us, in today's economy, to continue to be a bank, to spend $300, $400 million, wait 3 or 4 years to actually begin to recover that investment, you can imagine that the people who lend money to utilities aren't real excited about that. So there are a lot of different ways to go about creative rate making. There are ways to adjust rates on a more real-time basis. Saves you money, saves us money, makes the cost of borrowing less. All of those new rate undertakings are things that your commission is very attuned to, and quite honestly, they've opened up dockets to have these same kinds of public forums to discuss those things. I think it's really a visionary way to go about doing it so that we can have those dialogues. Lastly, the whole issue of building energy efficiency into an integrated resource plan. An integrated resource plan is an undertaking where we forecast out 10 years how much energy you might use, how much the economy of Arkansas might grow, and what we need to do to make sure that we have an adequate supply of electricity that's reliable and serves your needs as your family grows, your electric use grows, and or the economy of Arkansas grows, something that we're all encouraged by and something that we'd really love to see happen. So the integrated resource plan says we think there'll be this much growth in electricity. Energy efficiency built into that, the whole idea of sustainable energy resources built into that would say we think it's going to grow by 4% over the next decade. However, with energy efficiency, demand side management, demand response from you to us, it may only grow by 2%. So instead of building these many things, we need to build fewer things. And that's integrating the whole notion of sustainable energy into an integrated resource plan. We think that's a very appropriate way to go so that there's a dialogue and there's interface, and so that we're building what everyone in Arkansas believes is needed to satisfy the demands of Arkansas as we all see it grow, and we think that's important. If you look at some of the challenges our country faces, I think that eventually we'll see within a handful of years a very unique change in the way that we fuel our cars. Plug-in electric hybrid vehicles will be available in the commercial marketplace next year. It will surely grow in a hurry. Utilizing our power plants at night to plug your car in your home, or during the day to plug it in out here in the lot, a very important part of what we'll all do together. Building in energy efficiency with those additional energy demands is critically important. Having that dialogue with the commission to make sure that we all understand what we're doing long before we do it, critically important. So that may have been too deep in the technology side of things. I hope not, because it's so important that we have these kinds of dialogues and share our ideas. I'll pass the baton to my good friend David, and I'll eagerly await your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. First, let me say thank you to the chairman for this invitation. It's nice to be here. Very important topic. I've watched with interest the last few months as you've had other members come here and speak on this topic. I know those gentlemen, and I hope I can add a little bit to this discussion. Certainly, it's an honor to be here with Mike. Mike is one of the real leaders in the electric industry, and I respect him a lot. And I'll try not to repeat a lot of things that Mike said, and I'll maybe concentrate on what our company is doing around a few things, because I think what he said about the integrated resource planning and climate legislation and other things is absolutely right on track. I think that I would also like to just put in context my background a little bit and where I come from in Centerpoint. I think the chairman did a good job of laying that out. But Centerpoint Energy is a combination gas and electric utility. Unlike most utilities, we're very balanced. 40% of our operating income and assets are electric, and 60% are gas. So we're much more balanced than most utilities where they either skew one way or the other. We are the gas operator distributor here in Arkansas, and we're the largest distributor in Minnesota and the second largest in Texas. We also own an interstate pipeline system and a gas gathering and processing, and so we interface directly into the gas markets, especially right here in Arkansas, in the Fayetteville Shale areas. And I want to talk a little bit about our perspective about natural gas. So I think we come at it from kind of a balanced perspective, and certainly the company you work for influences perhaps how you think about some of these things. So I wanted to put it in my comments in perspective. I think there's no question climate change and carbon emissions have been the biggest topic that I've seen in the last couple of years. Energy independence, energy security, I think, is intertwined with that now. And there's no question we're going to have legislation, maybe not this year, but certainly within a year or two. It's going to have big impacts on the electric industry and big impacts, to be very honest, on the gas industry and the gas distribution industry a few years down the road. What I'd like to talk about, though, is what are the options we have in the next few years? Because I think the options are perhaps a little bit more limited than we'd like. And Mike's already touched on at least two of those. What I'd like to talk about a little bit is renewables. Second is energy efficiency. And third is natural gas and the role of natural gas in a sustainable energy future. First, renewables. This is an area that Centerpoint really doesn't participate in directly, but we do indirectly because we help get renewable wind energy to the market, as does Mike's company in Texas. Texas is very blessed to have a lot of wind. Some people say we have a lot of hot air, and that may be true as well. But in West Texas and in the Panhandle, we have a lot of wind, and over the last 10 years, we've developed a lot of wind energy. Now there's 8,000 megawatts of wind energy in Texas, and it's the largest wind state in the country today. Now, we're blessed with wind, but we're also blessed with one other thing. We're blessed with a state where the grid is all within the state boundaries. And as a result of that, we have been able to make decisions within the state to get wind power to the market because it benefits the whole state. That has been a real plus for Texas. And unfortunately, in other parts of the country, you have to cross state boundaries. And when you cross state boundaries is where you run into lots of issues. And I think part of the legislation now in Washington addresses how do we get more transmission sited and constructed so we can get renewable wind energy to the market areas. It is absolutely crucial if we're going to have wind energy as a resource in the future. And I think hopefully we're going to have some progress on that front, but it's a difficult issue. The other principal renewable resource is solar. Mike touched on this as well. We've been studying solar, as probably everybody has, for a number of years. And if you look at the recent legislation, it gives a preference to residential solar, distributed solar. And the reason I think it does is it does three things. It creates jobs by creating a whole bunch of work out there. It makes us more energy independent. We don't have to rely on any other countries for energy. And it absolutely doesn't produce any carbon. Now, carbon is produced to create the equipment, but once you get it in place, it is carbon free. So it's got those benefits. Unfortunately, as Mike said, it's got one drawback. It's still very, very expensive. You're talking about well into the double-digit rates for a kilowatt hour produced, and it's intermittent, just like wind. You can't necessarily rely on it every hour of the day. But I think it is going to be part of the solution in the future. And what I encourage is piloting those projects. We need to have some more projects out there, and we need to make sure we can integrate solar and wind into the grid. And I think piloting, even where you don't have a lot of cost benefit, might very well be worthwhile. What's going to make renewable energy, wind and solar, really what we want it to be is new battery technology. I was thinking the other day, gosh, we ought to be putting every bit of our money into battery technology, because if we can solve that, we've got it licked. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. We've had people working on it for years, and we still have people working on it, smart people, technical experts. But that is, in fact, what's going to make renewable energy, I think, something that we can really rely on in the future. Now, energy efficiency is something that utilities like Centerpoint and American Electric Power have been doing for years. I think we're experts. I think our customers believe we're experts. I think our customers trust us. And I believe we're a perfect entity to help distribute energy efficiency programs throughout the community. Here in Arkansas, as you know, we have a number of programs we already use. One is, it's called the Quick Start program. It was in 2007, it was initiated. We have a weatherization program, we have a commercial audit program, and we have two information programs, one statewide and one utility specific. We're going to make a filing this summer, and we're going to propose 6 new energy efficiency programs on the gas side. One is a water heater program, a second is a furnace program, third is a multifamily program directed at apartments, fourth and fifth are really at the commercial sector, a boiler program and a food service program, and then finally we're going to propose a water conservation program. Some of these will be new construction programs, some of them will be retrofit, but I think they all involve rebates and incentives. We have a lot of familiarity with these programs because in the state of Minnesota, we've been doing them since 1992. It's called the Conservation Improvement Program in Minnesota, and since 1992, we've saved over 11 billion cubic feet of gas as a result of the deployment of these type of energy efficiency programs. And last year alone, we almost saved 1 billion cubic feet of gas from the effect of all the programs we put there. So they're very effective, and I think we really ought to pursue those. Now, on the electric side, and we don't do electricity in Arkansas, but I know Mike and other utilities do. But in Houston, we have a number of energy efficiency programs, and we've been doing this since the early 1970s. Since that time, we've offset over 1,000 megawatts of load. That's 1,000 megawatts of new power plants we didn't need for peak. So these programs can be very, very effective. We approach it in 2 different ways. The first is we offer a standard offer program. So we post $1 per kW for a residential class, for a commercial class, and for an industrial class, and we let private industry bid in on those programs. And then we also have something that's called a market transformation program. Energy Star, which many of you are familiar with, is that kind of program. Low-income weatherization programs are those type of programs. We are required in Texas to offset 20% of the new load growth for electricity demand each and every year, the transmission and distribution utility. That's equivalent to about 50 megawatts for my company. We've had no problems with these programs being able to accomplish that. However, I will say that I am getting concerned because of what Mike referred to. We have a lot of energy efficiency money from the stimulus package coming into the states. We're going to all be kind of trying to go after the same customers to deploy energy efficiency. And I think Mike has a great idea about we ought to have some coordination. It might very well need to come through your local utilities to make sure we're not all knocking on the same doors out there. These programs are effective, but there's going to be a lot of energy efficiency dollars, and I think we need to be careful. The one other thing that we have found to be particularly important, and that is financial incentives for the utility. In Minnesota and in Texas, if we exceed our targets for the year, we're able to reap a benefit. We get to earn a percentage of the net benefits that we're producing, up to a given cost of the program. And that's really provided a lot of enthusiasm for our employees. Now, are we going to do this without incentives? The answer is yes. Will we do it better if we have financial incentives? So when our employees work really hard and they can help their shareholder as well as their customer, you're going to get a better product. So I would encourage the state to think about that. The other part of the energy efficiency piece is advanced metering. Mike talked about his program. In Houston, Texas, we're deploying a little over 2 million advanced meters over the next 5 years. It's going to cost $640 million. It's a lot of money. Now, it's a two-way communication program, and the advantages Mike talked about are exactly the advantages that the Texas Public Utility Commission saw in approving this program. We charge each of our customers a little over $3 a month for these advanced meters. And you get charged that whether you have a meter or not, because we're having to build a lot of infrastructure. But you're ultimately going to get that meter, and we have to be very honest, the utilities need a little cash flow to help pay for programs like this, not completely, but as you move along. And the reason the commission in Texas thought so much about these programs is they think this is not going to be just a peak shaving program, just not a demand management where we can cut the peak. It's going to be programs where you actually save energy. So many programs today, we can cut the peak, but after you cut the peak, we basically the energy you would have used comes back in the off-peak times. I think we're going to change people's behavior when you give them the type of information that Mike talked about. And I think it's going to take energy efficiency to a whole new level. So I think it's one of the most exciting things that we can do on the electric side, and it's certainly something that I know all utilities are looking at across the country. Now, let me briefly talk about natural gas. And I know some people may think that natural gas shouldn't be part of the sustainable discussion. I think it needs to be part of it, primarily because it's a alternative, one of the few alternatives we have in the near term before clean coal gets developed. I hope Mike's right that we get technology that quick. Certainly nuclear needs to be there, but we have to solve that cost puzzle with nuclear before it's going to proliferate. So I think natural gas is going to play a big role. On the electric front, it's kind of like deja vu all over again here. When I came to work in 1972, I came to work for Houston Lighting and Power. At that time, we were 100% natural gas-fired generation. We were the biggest purchaser of natural gas in the country. We moved to nuclear because we were going to be able to build nuclear plants so cheap that we weren't going to need to meter the energy, right? You remember, some of you may remember those days. It didn't turn out that way. And then the federal government said we're running out of natural gas, passed a law where we couldn't use natural gas as a boiler fuel after a given day. So we turned and we built lignite and coal, and these are great, great power plants. But then what happened? We had advances in technology in natural gas combined cycle. We had cheap natural gas, so the industry turned back to natural gas. And then at the beginning of this decade, natural gas prices spiked. The industry said, gosh, do we have an adequate supply of natural gas? Let's not put all our eggs in that basket. And companies like Mike's, they started building coal once again. And lo and behold, carbon came around, carbon and carbon emissions, and all of a sudden now it's hard to build a coal plant. So I think natural gas is going to be a solution. The question is there adequate supply? 5 years ago, when we thought about the supply of natural gas, we talked about LNG, liquefied natural gas from other countries. And everybody was worried about, gosh, is this going to go the way of oil, where we're relying on other countries for our resource? The fact is, something happened the last 5 years. What happened is technology. And it's through technology now we can do horizontal drilling and fracturing. And all of a sudden, formations like the Fayetteville Shale, the Barnett Shale, the Haynesville Shale, the Marcellus Shale, where geologists knew there were lots of natural gas, they didn't know how to get it. Now they know how to produce it. And this year, although we have about less than half of the rigs working in the United States compared to last year, our production has increased almost 5% in natural gas. Now, demand is way down too, but if you look at production, it's gone up. So I think the supply side of natural gas, at least we can take that off the table for a while. The experts that study this stuff believe with the shale plays that we have now a 100-year supply of natural gas. So the question is, though, at what price? What price can you produce it? I think the shale plays you can produce at a price of $4 and $5 and make a decent profit for these companies. If you go deep water off the Gulf or in some of the more conventional plays, you may need $6, $7 to produce it and make money. So I think there's a natural price there of $6, $7 that perhaps sets a natural floor for natural gas prices. Doesn't mean there's not going to be spikes. I think there will be, because when demand goes up faster than supply, we're going to see those prices reflect that. So, but I think that natural gas is plentiful, and that we need to look at it as an adequate resource. Now, I also want to tell you that one of the things that gas distribution companies have not done well, and that is talk about direct use of natural gas. And Mike probably will have a little bit of different opinion about this, but if you look at natural gas and get it from the wellhead to the home, you lose 10% of the energy value. To get electricity from the power plant to the home, you lose almost 70% of the value of the energy. So you would say, gosh, that really does favor natural gas. But then you have to look at on site. Look at the appliances. Electric appliances are much more efficient than gas appliances. It's just a fact. But if you look at the full cycle, from what we call the full source cycle, from the source to the site, and when you think about things like carbon, all of a sudden you start getting a different message or a different answer. Now, I don't think the answer is always natural gas. There's a lot of new heat pumps that are very efficient. There's some new electric water heaters, tankless, that are very efficient. But I think facts are friendly. We ought to let the facts tell us where we want to put our money. And I think we need to promote direct use of natural gas when it makes sense. And I think we ought to say that it's okay to do fuel switching, whether it's between natural gas and electricity or vice versa, because we need to be using the most efficient source of energy when we look at it through the big picture. Let me close by just saying that, we always talk about the obstacles in front of us. And gosh, we have so many challenges. And I think we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic, though. I just look at the last 30 years. We've had all kind of changes in appliance efficiency. A natural gas house today uses 30% less gas than it did 25 years ago. So, and that's all due to improved appliance efficiencies and improved home construction technology. We have better technology in power plants. Combined cycle is one, but we have a lot of advanced coal technology. We have advanced meters that will make these plug-in electric vehicles possible, that will make energy efficiency possible. Technology. We have horizontal drilling and fracturing that opened up a whole new amount of gas. Technology. And what's going to really solve the problems of the future is technology and innovation. It's going to be clean coal. It's going to be batteries. It's going to be better transmission of electricity. So I think we have a great future ahead of us. It's going to take a little time, and in the interim, we're going to have to do some of the things I think that Mike and I talked about. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. All right, now it's your turn.
I got to go first, Skip, so that I didn't have to agree with David every time he said he agreed with Mike.
Mike always knew you were smart. Now, let's throw it open for questions. If you will raise your hand, please, and wait till the microphone gets to you. We've got a big crowd, so it may take a little while. If you have a question, right up front, and we will get the mic to you.
On the question of carbon sequestering, can you tell us how the Chinese are doing with their program? And number two, what happened in Illinois when that project was abandoned or failed or what?
So the question is, what are the Chinese doing? Because they're building a substantial number of new power plants right now, and they're intending to capture, and rather than store, they're going to use the carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery like we do throughout much of this country. So they won't be doing the storage projects themselves. There's a bit of a bad rap on China. They've got some very dirty old coal plants, but they're building a new coal plant every week. And they're building those with advanced technologies, some with carbon capture, some without. But they're trying to move in the right direction, and that's what they're doing with it. The second half of your question was, there was a project called FutureGen. It was a plan that was going to make a zero-emission coal plant, and the Department of Energy was funding 75% of it, and electric utilities from around the world, mostly U.S. utilities, were funding the other 25%. The original plan was that that station would cost about $1.5 billion. As time went on and engineering was getting done and land was being procured and permits were getting received, the cost of steel went up, the cost of concrete went up, the cost of everything that went into the plant went up. It ended up being about a $2.4 billion power plant. And unfortunately, then Secretary of Energy Bodman said that he didn't think, because the utilities, our utility was one of the principal participants in that, because we weren't paying for the whole of it, we weren't watching the price. Nothing could have been further from the truth. The Secretary knew it all along. It was a major mistake that the Department of Energy made. It's up for reconsideration. Senator Dorgan of Illinois, the number 2 party in the Senate, after Harry Reid, and of course President Obama, being from Illinois, is interested in trying to bring that to the fore. The thing that's really embarrassing for us as a country is that we brought in the Indian utilities, we brought in some Japanese utilities, some Australian utilities, investments from Germany, and then we canceled the project. It was just silly. It was really ill thought through. That technology is there. In fact, as the stimulus package was coming out and there was so much conversation about shovel ready, we had a chance to tell Secretary Chu that that project was, in fact, shovel ready. But they've moved in another direction, and we've all moved in another direction. At our plant that I mentioned in West Virginia, this September, we'll begin to capture and store carbon underground. The wells are already drilled, the pipelines are laid, the subsurface geology is well understood. And again, we think that technology is important for the world, and we're working hard on it. Excellent question. Thank you very much.
We had a question up here, right over here. Yeah.
Hi, as you may know, Arkansas is about to start considering the question of whether the federal demand response market, where third parties can come in and compete to help people reduce electric demand, whether that will be allowed here. I'm wondering if that's something your companies are going to support, because I hate to report to you that during the last legislative session, some of us tried to improve energy efficiency in Arkansas, and I think that the companies represented here were fighting that very hard. Thank you.
On the electric side, we think demand response, if that's what you're speaking to, is that you would bid demand response into a capacity activity so that we could understand how much energy efficiency or demand reduction we can get. There's a logical way to go about doing it. The real difficult challenge in that kind of an undertaking is to make sure that we fully understand the technologies and the way that it will work. In many states across the country, some of our largest customers would love to play this game. We sell energy on average, generation energy on average, for about 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And the market prices in the summer peak months go to 18 or 19 cents a kilowatt hour. You're still buying from me at 5. What they would like to do is say, Mike, we're going to do a demand response. This month, we're going to turn down during the peak periods, and we'll, rather than you deliver us the energy for 15 cents or 5 cents, why don't you send us a check for 15 cents for every kilowatt hour we didn't deliver? Now, that may be fair to that customer, but that is so unfair to the 5.2 million customers that we serve across the system that we fight those kinds of things because they're driven by something other than true energy demand response. If the program's reasonable and balanced and addresses the issue of all of the customers, not just a single customer, then you'll find American Electric Power, Southwestern Electric Power Company in favor of those kinds of programs. And they are important, and I think it's important that we all do that. And again, the chairman and his fellow commissioners sitting here are part and parcel of the intellectual undertaking to understand how to go about doing it, to make sure that it addresses the issue of fairness and balance across the customer front.
Let me also address that. We have a program in Texas now that our company administers. It's a demand-side management program. We let commercial customers bid in and get paid $1 per kW for load curtailment. And this load can be curtailed by the ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, at peak times. It is one of the most cost-effective programs we have, and we're very much in support of that, and we use it to meet many of our energy efficiency goals. But also at a statewide level, we let loads bid in as a resource. So in other words, when the grid operator is managing the grid, they have a price that it's been bid in, and they can call on load reduction as opposed to a new generation to cut the load. That's been working now in Texas for 6 or 7 years. It is a deregulated market. It's a little bit different than in a fully integrated utility. You have some other concerns when you're in an integrated market, but those programs will work if they're well thought out and they're allowed to kind of let the market set the price. You know, the old days when we had FERPA and FERPA set a price at an avoided cost, you know, we spent way too much money then and our customers had to pay too much. I think these programs don't have to be that way. The market can set the price.
Several years ago, there was a very comprehensive study performed by MIT under the auspices of the Idaho National Laboratory that talked about the efficiencies that could be obtained in terms of electrical production by using deep well geothermal, a technology that produces no carbon dioxide, no noise, is very environmentally friendly, and appears to be a technology that can be very cost effective over time. Yet there is very little discussion about this technology during the national debate. Both of you talk about alternative and renewable energy sources and mention nary a word about this. And I'm just curious, why is there so little attention and so little money going in that direction?
It has been a while since I've looked at that. I remember 10 or 15 years ago when we owned generation, we did look at that. And I think it's the geology and it's limited to certain parts of the country. But I agree with your with that study and what you said. I think it can be very effective, but I think it is limited in application. But there are those applications where I think it should be used and can be very effective, and it is a non-carbon source of energy.
And what you see in the 11 states where we do business, we are a vertically integrated, regulated utility. So that kind of a project, we would develop the footprint for what we thought it could do. We would bring it to the regulatory commission, seeking their authority to do that. SWEPCO, which is a company familiar to many of you, serves Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We would need to get the authority to do that kind of a project from all three of those states. To David's point, it is geographically productive in some parts of the country rather than others. What we typically do with water for a carbon-free footprint is what's called pumped hydro facilities, where you pump water into an upper reservoir during the evening hours and then let that fall down during the daylight hours to be a supplier of energy at very reasonable cost, again, carbon-free as far as the footprint is concerned of that actual production. We constantly push the envelope on technology. I know that many of you here are familiar with our Turk Station. It's an ultra supercritical coal plant. The highest temperatures and highest pressures of any coal plant being built in the entire United States. It's the first ultra supercritical plant that will be built here. What that means, fewer tons of coal in for more megawatt hours of electricity out. The smallest carbon footprint that you can get from that technology. A few of them have been built around the world. It took a lot of courage for the three commissions to come forward and say, we've looked at the demand curves, we think that makes sense, and go forward and do that. David mentioned something that we also work very hard on in the technology sense, and that's energy storage. We have installed 5 or 6 megawatts of battery technology on our system to store energy that's made during the day or made during the evening to be delivered during the day. And when you're thinking of a battery, think of a piece of equipment about as big as half of this room to store about 1.5 megawatts of electricity. So it's not, none of this is inconsequential. When we talk about the carbon capture and storage project that we're doing in West Virginia, the building is 400 feet by 300 feet, 5 stories tall. The stack that's being built to handle the flue gas after the carbon's been taken out of is 150 feet tall, and 12 of us, arm to arm, could hug it. That project alone is about $75 million. So we need to always go to our commissions because, again, we're regulated utilities to say we think these are the right things to do, these are the right steps to take. They're cost conservative, they're engineeringly tested. One of the things that American Electric Power has been doing for 102 years now is forcing that technology envelope forward. That's why we're so pleased to have the opportunity not only to do the ultra supercritical plant, because it's technology that will be deployed throughout the world, throughout this country, not just our company, and also to do the carbon capture storage work.
I have a question for Mr. Morris. I'm over here. Mr. Morris, I've noticed across the country that states all around the country and even in this region are turning down the idea of building new coal-fired power plants. Last count, it was almost 100 in the last few years have been rejected or abandoned for a variety of reasons, whether it's environmental reasons or reasons of cost. I know that your company is the largest burner of coal, I guess, in the Western Hemisphere. I understand why you would have an interest in coal, but can you explain to us why Arkansas should perhaps be the last state to approve a coal plant? Why should we approve a coal plant in southwest Arkansas when state after state in our region and across the nation are saying no to coal?
I would argue because Arkansas is a bit more of a visionary than many of the other states. The fact of the matter is, and I don't mean this in a confrontational sense, and I know your question wasn't meant that way either, and I surely didn't take it that way. Coal is going to be burned worldwide. There is absolutely no question about that. Some years ago, when President Clinton was in office, and the chairman mentioned that I'm on the Institute of Nuclear Power Operators, we were very worried about the other plant at Chernobyl, we as an industry. We as the U.S. nuclear industry, many of you don't know that there is another plant at Chernobyl that has been working for a long time. President Clinton dispatched Vice President Gore to go speak to the chairman of the Ukraine, or the prime minister of the country. And he suggested to Vice President Gore that he would either freeze his people that winter or he'd run Chernobyl. Have a nice flight back. That's exactly the dialogue that's going on today with the Chinese and the Indians when we address the issue of global warming. It's global warming. It's not Arkansas warming. It's not American Electric Power warming. It's not U.S. warming. It's global warming. The globe doesn't know if a ton of carbon comes from Bangor, Maine, or Beijing, China. It's going to be burned everywhere, in this country as well. 50% of today's electricity is coal-based. Clean coal is viable and doable. Ultra-supercritical is the next step in that engineering challenge. The technological prowess of this country and others around the world will see to it that that happens. Let's look at 5 decades. Let's just take the 2010 decade that we're in today, or the 2000s that we're in, the late 1990s, the 1980s, the 1970s, the 1960s. More coal burned in the world in all of those decades. The air has gotten cleaner in every of those decades. The issue of global warming has come to the fore as one more technological challenge that we'll handle. Ultra-supercritical carbon capture and storage are technologies that are needed throughout the world, and I'm proud, and I hope you are too, that an Arkansas-based company is deeply involved in that.
Mr. Morris, my question is not about carbon, but about small particulates that are respirable. We can't see them, but they're in the air. A recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of our most respected scientific journals, looked at these small particles in the air of 100 different cities in the U.S., and Little Rock was one. And they found a correlation between the more particulates in the air, the less the life expectancy is of that population. And it was a very significant difference. The higher the particulates, the lower the life expectancy. Life expectancy is the single best way to measure the health of a population. You probably know that the U.S. ranks last in life expectancy in all the developed nations of the world, and Arkansas ranks very low among all the states in the U.S. The particulate matter in Little Rock, Arkansas was higher than most cities in the U.S. So these particulates that coal-fired generating plants produce are very important health matter, just like carbon is for climate. And I'd like for you to comment about your view of these particulates that your plants emit.
Well, as you know, under both the Clean Air Act and the consideration of the global warming particulates that are addressed in the Waxman-Markey bill that came out of the House Energy and Commerce Committee last week, those issues are addressed. There is technology today for certain microns, I think it's 2.5 microns of the small particulate matter that's captured in our current technology. And whatever the law is required in this country to be done will be done. You know and I know, and I'm not surely taking any argument with the comment that you make about life expectancy. Two very interesting facts. Many other things come to play in life expectancy, and in the developed countries, your data is accurate. Many of the developed countries have much more nuclear power than we do as a percent of their generation. But think about the life expectancy in India and China, and as they electrify, those life expectancies will grow exponentially compared to the small particle impact that'll have on those generations as well. So it's really a significant balance that we need to address, and those are the things that we're trying to address. Technology can address those issues and will address those issues, and compliance with the Clean Air Act and whatever comes out of the current global warming discussions and the world discussions that'll go on in Copenhagen this December are essential to the well-being of the entire globe.
My question for both of you. We know that anytime there's a major paradigm shift in the civilization or in the society or even within a state, we know that it's going to be impacted by a trust factor based on the consumer education level of your customer or your stockholder. How important do either of your industries feel that the customer and the stockholder needs to understand this technical shift? And how will they respond if they don't have it? We recognize that the legislature is one of the places that probably knows more than the stockholder. But the three age groups, the baby boomers whose tolerance for not understanding is very low if they don't understand. The aging are the ones who were your stockholders who have had a hit during this economic downfall. And then look at those young people up there. Those are your future customers. How important is it that these three consumer groups understand this paradigm shift for their own safety?
Well, it's a great question. I think the answer is it's extremely important. And I think we have a lot of educating to do because none of this stuff comes free, one. And it is going to take a change, perhaps, in lifestyle of some of us because of these changes. And I think we owe it to everybody, to our customers, our shareholders, our children, our grandchildren, to make sure they understand what's going on, what we're trying to accomplish, what it's going to cost, and if they have to change their behavior, then they'll know why. If they want to ride their bike to the store because they know that by doing that, rather than by getting in a car, they'll save some carbon emissions, I think we ought to educate them, make sure they know. That's and so they can take that action. So I think it's a great question. It is extremely important. Things just like advanced metering, which is something we're doing in Houston, which I mentioned, we're going neighborhood by neighborhood. As we roll out these advanced meters, we educate that neighborhood and tell them, here's what you're going to have. Here's the tool. Here's the power. You can make a difference. And so they can take action. And if we don't educate our customers, they're not going to know what to do with this technology. And so I think it's extremely important we do that.
I don't think there's anything more important than the trust that we have the opportunity to build with our investors, with those who lend us money, and with those who send us their checks every month for the electricity that we send to them. And to your point, I've had the opportunity, we did throughout 2008, and we're doing some here in 2009, what we called the University Listening Tour. So I had a chance to chat with the students at the University of Arkansas. I had a chance to chat with the students at MIT, at Stanford, and because we're Columbus-based, at the Ohio State University. But the fact remains, I am so excited about the kids. The technologies that David and I have talked about, the intermittency of wind, the intermittency of sun, the battery technology that we need, the geothermal technology that was spoken about earlier on, the continuation of moving advancements forward on what are the Chinese doing with things like carbon capture and storage. That generation is ready. And the trust that our shareholders have put in us, and they've been hurt over the last couple of years, no question about it. Actually, only over the last year, and I wish that weren't the case, but they're still with us. They're still with us, and I think that's important. We today, our yield on your investment in American Electric Power stock is 6.3%. Now, if you've got money in a bank, I bet you we're more steady than that bank, and they're paying you 1.2%. We're paying you 6.1%. But I think it's important. The baby boomers, I'm one of them. Unfortunately, for me anyways, I'm on the cutting edge in 1946. So in 2011, I'll turn 65. In fact, I was born on November the 11th. So I've told my board of directors and all the employees at the company at 11:11 in the morning, on 11/11/11, I'm retiring. And I'll be looking for that 6.1% yield right after that. But the fact remains, trust is essential. My mom and dad, Dad said, your word's your bond, son. That's all you've ever got to trade on. And my mom was a big believer in the golden rule. So with 11 states, 11 commissioners, 11 chairs, many other commissioners, 11 governors, 22 senators, uncountable members of Congress, I think trust is the most important thing that we can deal with. And if I break that bond, I've lost that trust. You have to earn it every single day. That's why we're here. This dialogue, I applaud the Arkansas Commission. I applaud the chairman for going through these dockets. We're all spending a great deal of time trying to educate each other. And I was hoping that when David and I, we talk our business, we talk about peak, off-peak, KWHs, MWs, and you're all going, what are they talking about? But this is what this is about, and trust is essential. And everywhere that we do it, with our vendors, with the people that work for us, it's essential and easy to lose. Thanks for your question. I love it.
Another question? Any other questions? Right here. Yes, sir.
As I understand T. Boone Pickens' strategy, it's for energy independence, and he talks with a lot of emphasis on wind, but to free up natural gas to power automobiles. And there was never any comment about that as an alternative or Boone Pickens' whole strategy.
Well, I think his strategy has changed a little bit. I think now he's more focused on 18-wheelers rather than automobiles because the infrastructure required for a natural gas vehicle, we don't have it now in any state. Utah probably has more than any state. They're good vehicles. They unfortunately take up a lot of space in the trunk, and so they haven't ever caught on. My company, we tried to get fleets onto natural gas back in the 90s. We were fairly successful, but to be very honest, it was a losing money operation. We couldn't give the facilities away 5 years ago, but I think it is going to be part of the solution. I think for natural gas, initially it's going to be fleets that always come back to a central place every night, whether it's buses or garbage trucks or something like that. And then I think there is going to be a role for natural gas in the future in a vehicle. But the manufacturers today, there's not very many choices. There's just a few vehicles you can buy. I really think the plug-in electric vehicle is more likely to be the small vehicle to ultimately surface than a natural gas fired vehicle. But I think there's going to be a mix there. But I think there's so many benefits to these plug-in electric vehicles that's going to probably lead the way. That's where manufacturers are putting most of their research and development, and it's not on the natural gas side. It's going to have to be demand pull to get the manufacturers to start putting a lot of money into the natural gas vehicles.
I agree, David. But let me touch on that because we're part of the Pickens plan. American Electric Power joined Boone in that endeavor early on in this year because I think he's got a grand idea. And to David's point, he has taken his conversations over to on-road trucks, 18-wheelers. And this guy is 80 years old, and he has those facts squared up in his head, how many vehicles you can put on natural gas, how you could do natural gas along the interstate highway system like we have diesel today. You know, there's a lot of gas pipelines. David's company among them have many miles of pipelines. And then he joined in our endeavor because we think the transmission to be built to bring the wind to market to allow gas to go into the 18-wheelers is an essential part. And then ultimately, clearly I agree with David that plug-in electric hybrids are going to be part of the answer. We have the infrastructure. You've got a plug more than likely in your closet, in your garage. I hope you don't have a plug in your closet. Wherever that came from, I have no idea. But the fact of the matter is you can charge your vehicle at night, and there's electricity out here in the parking lot underground that's on some kind of a delivery system that brings it in. What you'll see companies like ours and others do, we will invest in building trees, electric trees, not trees like but a stack of electric plug-in. You can plug your car while you're working. That's a great form of energy storage eventually. Meter technology, as it advances, you can make exchanges, put energy back in the meter. I always tell everybody, I hope they know that I'm charging my car and they don't take all the energy out of it, so when I get out of work, it won't turn over. But next year, 2010, Renault and Nissan, Toyota, Hyundai will all bring plug-in electric hybrid vehicles. The U.S. government owns General Motors as of Monday. They'll be bringing out plug-in electric hybrid vehicles. Barney Frank has said, now we're going to design the cars I want. God, that scares me to death, but maybe it doesn't scare everybody. But that technology is going to work. And think about what's really at Boone's bottom, in his theory, is this. Let's get rid of imported oil. Let's start fueling the transportation vehicles in this country with our part. You think about worldwide oil demand. Everyone remembers last summer, $150 a barrel, $4 at the gasoline station. 89 million barrels produced a day, 89 million barrels consumed a day. Supply demand absolutely balanced. I'm a biologist by training, you heard that, and a lawyer by profession. I'm not an economist, but I do know this. If there's a lot of things for sale and not many buyers, the price comes down. If there's a few things for sale and a lot of buyers, the price goes up. 30 million cars in China for 1.3 billion people. 300 million cars in the United States for 300 million people. China is they're building roads right now so that their people can move around. Once this economy settles out worldwide, you're going to see demand going into the 90 to 100 million barrels of oil a day, and the production capacity isn't there. So we've got to do something about that, or we're going to keep sending hundreds of billions of dollars to countries that turn around and use that money to do damage to us. That's really at the bottom of his plan. I've known that old bugger since 1985. He's a good man with a good plan. Now, he may make some money at it, and that probably offends some. But like he said, I lost $1 billion recently, so give me a break.